My name is Sarah Chen, and I used to believe in justice. I used to believe that hard work, integrity, and loyalty would eventually be rewarded. I used to believe that the people closest to you would never betray you in the most devastating way possible. I was wrong about everything. 3 months ago, I was the Chief Technology Officer of Nexus Dynamics, a rising star in the tech world. I had built the company's revolutionary AI platform from the ground up, working 18-hour days, sleeping on office couches, and pouring my soul into every line of code. The platform was my masterpiece, an AI system that could predict market trends with 94% accuracy, a technology that would revolutionize financial forecasting forever. Marcus Webb, my co-founder and supposed best friend since college, was the CEO. We had started the company in his garage 5 years ago, dreaming of changing the world together. I handled the technical side while he managed the business operations. We were the perfect team, or so I thought. The betrayal came on a Tuesday morning in March. I walked into the office, coffee in hand, ready to present our latest breakthrough to the board of directors. Instead, I found security guards at my desk, boxing up my belongings. Sarah Chen, the head of security, a burly man with cold eyes, approached me. "You're terminated effective immediately. Please surrender your access cards and company devices." I stood there, stunned, watching strangers rifle through my personal items. There must be some mistake. I'm the CTO. I have a board meeting in an hour. "Ma'am, please don't make this difficult." That's when Marcus appeared, flanked by 2 lawyers I'd never seen before. My oldest friend, the man who had been best man at my wedding, wouldn't even look me in the eye. "Marcus, what the hell is going on?" He finally met my gaze, and I saw something that chilled me to the bone. Not guilt, not remorse, but cold calculation. "Sarah, we've discovered some irregularities in your work. Code theft, specifically. We have evidence that you've been selling proprietary algorithms to our competitors." The world tilted. "That's insane. I built those algorithms. I am those algorithms." One of the lawyers, a sharp-faced woman in an expensive suit, stepped forward. "Ms. Chen, we have documentation showing unauthorized access to company servers from your personal devices, as well as communication records with representatives from Titan Corp, our primary competitor." I've never spoken to anyone from Titan Corp in my life. But even as I protested, I realized the horrifying truth. Marcus had planned this. Every late night I'd worked alone, every time I'd accessed the servers from home to fix critical bugs, every legitimate conversation I'd had with industry contacts. It had all been twisted into evidence of my supposed betrayal. The security guards escorted me out like a common criminal. As I walked through the lobby I had helped design, past the inspirational quotes about innovation and teamwork that I had suggested for the walls, I felt the stares of my former colleagues. Some looked shocked, others whispered behind their hands. The rumor mill was already spinning. Within hours, the story had leaked to the tech blogs. Nexus Dynamics CTO fired for corporate espionage. My phone buzzed incessantly with calls from reporters, former colleagues, and headhunters who suddenly wanted nothing to do with me. My professional reputation, built over 15 years of meticulous work, was destroyed in a single morning. But Marcus wasn't finished with me yet. The next week, I received a legal notice. Nexus Dynamics was suing me for $50 million in damages, claiming that my alleged theft had compromised their competitive advantage. They were also seeking an injunction to prevent me from working in the tech industry for 5 years. I hired the best lawyer I could afford, which, after the legal fees, wasn't very good. During our first meeting, he delivered news that shattered what remained of my world. "Sarah, I have to be honest with you. The evidence they have is comprehensive. Financial records showing payments into offshore accounts linked to your name. Email communications that appear to be from your account. Even code samples that match your programming style found on Titan Corp's servers." "It's all fabricated," I insisted. "Marcus is framing me. That's a serious accusation. Do you have any proof?" I didn't. That was the genius of Marcus's plan. He had been positioning himself as the innocent victim while systematically building a case against me. Every piece of evidence could be fabricated by someone with CEO-level access to company systems and unlimited resources. The trial was a nightmare. Marcus took the stand and painted me as a bitter, jealous colleague who had felt overshadowed by his business success. He spoke of how he'd noticed my erratic behavior in recent months, how I'd been resentful about his engagement to Victoria Sterling, the daughter of a prominent venture capitalist. He claimed I had made inappropriate advances toward him, which he had professionally rebuffed. Every word was a lie, but he delivered it with such conviction that I could see the jury believing him. My own lawyer seemed half convinced by the performance. The final blow came when they played a recording of what appeared to be my voice discussing the sale of Nexus algorithms to Titan Corp. The voice was perfect. My intonation, my speech patterns, even my nervous laugh. It was also completely fabricated, created using AI voice synthesis technology that I had ironically helped develop. I lost everything. The jury awarded Nexus Dynamics $30 million in damages. My house was seized, my savings emptied, my reputation destroyed. I had to move in with my sister in a one-bedroom apartment in Queens, sleeping on a pull-out couch and working at a coffee shop to pay for basic necessities. The worst part wasn't the financial ruin or the professional exile. It was the isolation. Former colleagues avoided me. Friends distanced themselves. Even my sister, God bless her, sometimes looked at me with doubt in her eyes. When everyone around you believes you're capable of betrayal, you start to question yourself. But I never stopped believing in my innocence. And more importantly, I never stopped planning my revenge. 6 weeks after the trial, I was working the evening shift at Grind Coffee, serving overpriced lattes to the same tech bros who used to compete for my attention at industry conferences. None of them recognized me, or if they did, they pretended not to. I had become invisible, a ghost in my own former world. That's when I overheard the conversation that changed everything. 2 young programmers from Titan Corp were discussing their latest project over espresso shots. One of them, a cocky kid with designer glasses and a man bun, was bragging about their new market prediction algorithm. "The accuracy rates are insane," he said. "We're hitting 94% consistency on quarterly forecasts. Our stock price has doubled since we implemented it." My blood ran cold. 94%. That was the exact accuracy rate of my algorithm. Not similar, not coincidentally close, but exactly the same down to the decimal point. I leaned closer, pretending to wipe down nearby tables while they continued their conversation. "Where did the algorithm come from?" the other programmer asked. "Executive acquisition," Man Bun replied. "Some former Nexus Dynamics guy sold it to us. Apparently, he was their CEO or something, felt bad about how they treated their employees. Said he wanted to make sure good technology didn't go to waste." My hands shook as I processed what I was hearing. Marcus hadn't just framed me for corporate espionage, he had actually committed it himself. He had stolen my life's work, sold it to our biggest competitor, and then pinned the crime on me to cover his tracks. I excused myself and ran to the bathroom, where I threw up everything I'd eaten that day. The magnitude of his betrayal was overwhelming. It wasn't just about money or business, it was personal. He had destroyed me not as collateral damage, but as the primary objective. That night, I couldn't sleep. I paced my sister's tiny apartment, trying to process what I'd learned. I needed proof, but how could I get it? I had no access to corporate systems, no connections in the industry, no resources to conduct an investigation. Then I remembered something from my college days with Marcus. He had always been paranoid about keeping digital records of sensitive communications. But his paranoia had a blind spot. He trusted old-fashioned, offline methods. In college, he had kept a physical journal where he recorded his most private thoughts and plans. It was an old leather-bound notebook that he carried everywhere, claiming it helped him think through complex problems. If Marcus was still keeping a journal, and if he had documented his plan to frame me, It would be the smoking gun I needed. But getting access to it would require getting close to him again, and that seemed impossible given the circumstances. Unless, I spent the next week researching Marcus's current situation. Nexus Dynamics had gone public 2 months after my departure, with the company's valuation skyrocketing thanks to their new AI platform. Marcus was now worth over $200 million on paper. He had moved into a penthouse apartment in Manhattan and was engaged to Victoria Sterling, with their wedding planned for the fall. More importantly, he had hired a new executive assistant, his third one in as many months. According to LinkedIn, the previous assistants had quit after short tenures, citing impossible working conditions and unrealistic expectations. Marcus had always been demanding, but success seemed to have made him worse. I began to formulate a plan. It was risky, possibly illegal, and would require me to become someone I had never been before. But Marcus had already destroyed the person I used to be. It was time to become someone new. Becoming Isabella Rodriguez required more than just a fake resume and a new hairstyle. It required me to transform into someone Marcus wouldn't recognize, not just physically, but psychologically. The Sarah Chen who had trusted blindly and worked honestly was gone. In her place, I created a persona who was charming, ambitious, and just ruthless enough to appeal to Marcus's ego. I spent 3 weeks preparing. I changed my appearance first: dark hair instead of blonde, contact lenses to change my eye color, subtle makeup to alter the shape of my face. I practiced a slight accent, claiming to be from Los Angeles originally. I created a complete backstory, complete with references from fictional previous employers and a carefully crafted personality profile. The hardest part was suppressing my natural mannerisms. Marcus had known me for over 15 years. He would recognize my gestures, my speech patterns, the way I organized information. I had to become someone else entirely. Isabella Rodriguez was efficient but not brilliant, attractive but not stunning, ambitious but not threatening. She was exactly the kind of person Marcus would want working for him, someone who would stroke his ego while handling his mundane tasks. I applied for the executive assistant position through a staffing agency, using forged credentials and a contact at a small firm who owed me a favor from my previous life. My references were impeccable. I had created an entire network of fictional colleagues who would vouch for Isabella's work ethic and discretion. The interview was scheduled for a Tuesday morning. I arrived at the Nexus Dynamics building where I had once belonged, now playing the role of an eager job candidate. The security guard who had escorted me out 3 months earlier didn't give me a second glance. Marcus's current assistant, a frazzled-looking woman named Jennifer, led me to his office. The space had been redecorated since my departure, more expensive, more pretentious, with awards and news clippings celebrating the company's success prominently displayed. Marcus entered the room, and I had to fight every instinct to scream at him. He looked prosperous and confident, wearing a $3,000 suit and a watch that cost more than I used to make in a month. He was the picture of success, built on the foundation of my destroyed life. Isabella, right? He extended his hand, and I shook it, forcing a smile. Tell me about yourself. I launched into Isabella's backstory, emphasizing my organizational skills and my ability to anticipate executive needs. I made sure to laugh at his jokes, to seem impressed by his accomplishments, to project just the right amount of professional admiration. I've been following Nexus Dynamics' success, I said, letting a note of genuine enthusiasm creep into my voice. The AI platform you developed is revolutionary. It must be incredibly rewarding to see your vision come to life. His chest puffed up slightly. It's been quite a journey. The technology is something I've been working on for years, refining the algorithms, perfecting the prediction models. Of course, I had help from my team, but the core innovation was mine. I nodded eagerly, as if I were hearing this for the first time instead of listening to him steal credit for my life's work. I'd love to be part of supporting that kind of innovation, even in a small way. The interview lasted 30 minutes. Marcus asked predictable questions about my availability, my salary requirements, my willingness to work long hours. I answered each one perfectly, projecting exactly the kind of eager compliance he was looking for. As I was leaving, he stopped me at the door. "One more thing, Isabella. This position requires absolute discretion. I handle sensitive information, and I need to know that my assistant can be trusted completely." I met his eyes directly. "Mr. Webb, discretion is one of my strongest qualities. I understand that trust is earned, and I'm prepared to prove myself worthy of it." He smiled, and I saw the same calculating look that had chilled me during my termination. "I believe you are. Jennifer will call you tomorrow with the details." I got the job. My first day as Marcus's executive assistant was surreal. I sat at a desk 20 feet from the office where I had once been an equal partner, taking dictation from the man who had destroyed my life. Every moment required careful performance. I had to seem competent but not too competent, helpful but not too insightful, present but not too memorable. Marcus was exactly as demanding as his former assistants had indicated. He expected me to anticipate his needs, manage his calendar flawlessly, and handle personal tasks that had nothing to do with business. I booked his restaurant reservations, arranged his dry cleaning, and even helped plan aspects of his wedding to Victoria. The hardest part was listening to him take credit for my work in meeting after meeting. He would present his algorithms to investors, explain his innovations to the board, and accept praise for his vision. Each compliment felt like a knife twist, but I smiled and took notes like the perfect assistant. For the first 2 weeks, I focused on establishing Isabella's credibility. I was always early, never complained about long hours, and handled every task with professional efficiency. I needed Marcus to trust me completely before I could begin searching for evidence of his betrayal. The breakthrough came during my 3rd week. Marcus was in back-to-back meetings all afternoon, and I was organizing his office when I noticed something interesting. His desk had a locked drawer that he opened frequently but always closed when others were around. It was exactly the kind of place where someone might keep a private journal. I tested the lock during lunch break when the office was empty. It was a simple mechanism, the kind that could be picked with basic tools. I had learned lock-picking years ago as a hobby. Sarah Chen had been interested in puzzles and mechanical challenges. Isabella Rodriguez, apparently, had inherited that skill. The next day, I came prepared. During Marcus's lunch meeting with potential investors, I carefully picked the lock and opened the drawer. Inside, I found exactly what I was looking for: a leather-bound journal, the same style Marcus had used in college. My hands shook as I photographed each page with my phone. The journal was a goldmine of incriminating evidence. Marcus had documented his entire plan in meticulous detail, apparently viewing it as a complex business strategy rather than a personal betrayal. The entries began 6 months before my termination. The AI platform is almost ready for market. Problem: Sarah's contribution is too significant. If we go public with her as CTO, she'll own too much of the narrative. Need to find a way to marginalize her role or eliminate her entirely. Investigated legal options for reducing Sarah's equity stake. Lawyers say it's impossible without cause. Need to create cause. Titan Corp has reached out about acquiring our AI technology. They're offering $200 million, but only if we can guarantee no legal challenges from original developers. Sarah's patents are problematic. Solution: frame Sarah for corporate espionage. Sell technology to Titan Corp as damaged goods at discount price. Use her termination as justification for reduced valuation. She takes the fall, I keep the profits. The entries continued, detailing how he had manufactured evidence, created false communications, and even used AI voice synthesis to create the recording that had convicted me. He had documented every lie, every fabricated piece of evidence, every moment of my destruction. But the most damning entry was the most recent. Sarah was always too trusting. Even now, she probably believes this was about business. She never understood that I resented her from the beginning. She was smarter than me, more innovative, more respected. The company should have been mine alone. Destroying her wasn't just necessary, it was satisfying. I photographed everything, my heart pounding as I captured proof of his malice. This wasn't just corporate espionage, it was personal vindication. Marcus hadn't just stolen my algorithms, he had stolen my life out of jealousy and spite. I closed the journal and relocked the drawer, my hands steady now despite the adrenaline coursing through my veins. I had what I needed to clear my name, but simply exposing Marcus's crimes wasn't enough. He had taken everything from me, my career, my reputation, my financial security, my sense of self. I wanted him to experience the same complete destruction he had inflicted on me. Having proof of Marcus's betrayal was only the beginning. Simply releasing the information wouldn't be enough. Marcus had resources, lawyers, and connections that could help him minimize the damage. I needed to orchestrate his downfall carefully, ensuring that when the truth came out, it would destroy him as completely as he had destroyed me. I spent the next month building my case while maintaining my cover as Isabella. During the day, I was the perfect assistant, anticipating Marcus's needs and handling his affairs with professional efficiency. At night, I was Sarah Chen, the tech expert planning the most important hack of her career. My first priority was securing all the evidence. I made multiple copies of Marcus's journal entries, storing them in encrypted cloud accounts and physical drives hidden in various locations. I also began documenting his current activities, particularly his dealings with Titan Corp and his handling of company finances. The more I investigated, the more corruption I uncovered. Marcus hadn't just stolen my algorithms. He had been systematically siphoning money from Nexus Dynamics through a series of shell companies. He was inflating expenses, creating fake consulting contracts, and even manipulating stock prices through coordinated trades. My termination had been just one part of a larger pattern of fraud. I also discovered that I wasn't his only victim. Marcus had pushed out 2 other founding employees through similar schemes, though none as elaborate as mine. He had been consolidating power for years, eliminating anyone who might challenge his authority or share in his profits. But I needed more than just evidence of his crimes. I needed to understand his weaknesses, his pressure points, the things that would hurt him most when I struck. That meant getting closer to his personal life, particularly his relationship with Victoria Sterling. Victoria was interesting. She was beautiful, intelligent, and came from serious money. Her father was a venture capitalist who had invested $50 million in Nexus Dynamics. On the surface, she seemed like the perfect trophy wife for Marcus's new status. But I began to notice cracks in their relationship. Victoria visited the office frequently, and I observed their interactions carefully. She was demanding and entitled, expecting Marcus to drop everything for her needs. He complied, but I could see the strain in his face. She was also sharp, much smarter than Marcus gave her credit for. I suspected she was beginning to see through his carefully constructed facade. Their wedding was scheduled for October 15 at the Sterling family estate in the Hamptons. It was going to be a massive affair, 300 guests, covered by society magazines, with a guest list that included tech moguls, politicians, and celebrities. Marcus saw it as the culmination of his success, the moment when he would cement his place in New York's elite circles. I saw it as the perfect opportunity to destroy him. The plan began to take shape. I would wait until the wedding week, when Marcus would be most distracted and vulnerable. Then I would release the evidence in a carefully orchestrated sequence that would maximize the damage. The key was timing. I needed to ensure that once the truth came out, Marcus would have no opportunity to recover or spin the narrative. But I also wanted something more personal. Marcus had betrayed our friendship, stolen my work, and destroyed my life out of jealousy and spite. I wanted him to know who had brought him down. I wanted him to experience the same sense of helplessness and betrayal that I had felt. That meant revealing my true identity at the perfect moment. The week before Marcus's wedding was chaos. As his assistant, I was responsible for coordinating last-minute details, managing vendor communications, and ensuring that everything ran smoothly. Ironically, I was helping to orchestrate what Marcus believed would be the happiest day of his life, while simultaneously preparing for its complete destruction. Victoria had transformed into a bridezilla, calling the office multiple times a day with demands and complaints. The flowers weren't right, the musicians weren't prestigious enough, the guest list wasn't impressive enough. Marcus was increasingly stressed, snapping at employees and working longer hours to escape the wedding pressure. I played the role of the supportive assistant, handling crisis after crisis while secretly documenting everything. I had access to Marcus's calendar, his communications, and his personal files. I knew exactly where he would be and when, which gave me the perfect opportunity to execute my plan. On Wednesday, 3 days before the wedding, I made my first move. I sent anonymous copies of Marcus's journal entries to 3 investigative journalists who specialized in corporate fraud. I included enough context to help them understand the significance of the evidence, but not enough to reveal my identity or my role in obtaining it. The journalists began their investigations immediately. By Thursday, they were making calls to Nexus Dynamics, Titan Corp., and other companies mentioned in the journal. The pressure was building, but Marcus was too distracted by wedding preparations to notice. On Friday, the day before the wedding, I executed the second phase of my plan. I had spent weeks preparing a comprehensive report that detailed Marcus's crimes, complete with evidence, timelines, and financial records. I sent copies to the SEC, the FBI's White-Collar Crime Division, and the New York State Attorney General's office. I also sent a copy to Richard Sterling, Victoria's father and Nexus Dynamics' primary investor. I knew he would be furious about the fraud, but more importantly, I knew he would be protective of his daughter and his family's reputation. The report was scheduled to be delivered at 5 p.m. on Friday, giving the recipients time to review it over the weekend before taking action on Monday. But I had one more surprise planned for Marcus. Saturday morning, the day of the wedding, I arrived at the Sterling estate early. My official role was to help coordinate the vendor setup and ensure everything ran smoothly. My actual purpose was to be present for Marcus's downfall. The estate was magnificent, rolling lawns, perfectly manicured gardens, and a house that looked like it belonged in a magazine. Hundreds of workers were setting up tents, arranging flowers, and preparing for the evening ceremony. Marcus was in his element, playing the role of the successful groom surrounded by wealth and prestige. At 2 p.m., 4 hours before the ceremony, Richard Sterling requested a private meeting with Marcus. I watched from across the lawn as the 2 men disappeared into Sterling's study. 20 minutes later, Marcus emerged looking pale and shaken. Sterling had received my report and confronted Marcus about the fraud. The wedding was off, but I wasn't finished yet. Marcus was in his room at the Sterling estate, frantically making phone calls to his lawyers when I knocked on the door. He had sent me to retrieve some documents from his car, but I had a different agenda. "Come in," he called, his voice strained. I entered the room where he was pacing, his tuxedo half-dressed, his face flushed with panic. He looked up at me with the desperate expression of a man whose world was collapsing. "Isabella, I need you to call the office and get me the contact information for our crisis management firm. This situation with Victoria's father is complicated." I closed the door behind me and took a deep breath. After months of deception, it was time to reveal the truth. "I don't think a crisis management firm is going to help you, Marcus." Something in my tone made him stop pacing. He looked at me more carefully, and I saw the moment when recognition began to dawn. "You know," I continued, letting my voice return to its natural cadence, "I've been wondering for months how you managed to fabricate all that evidence against me." The voice recording was particularly impressive. It must have cost a fortune to create something that convincing. Marcus's face went white. "Sarah?" I smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Hello, Marcus. It's been a while." He staggered backward, gripping the edge of the bed for support. "This is impossible. You can't be here. Oh, but I am. I've been here for months, actually. Taking your dictation, organizing your schedule, helping plan your wedding. You have no idea how satisfying it's been to watch you take credit for my work day after day. The implications hit him like a physical blow. The journal. You read my journal. I read it, I photographed it, and I shared it with some very interested parties. The SEC, the FBI, the New York State Attorney General. Oh, and your future father-in-law, though I suspect he's no longer your future father-in-law. Marcus's knees buckled, and he sat heavily on the bed. You don't understand. I can explain everything. The pressure, the investors, the competition. I had to make tough decisions. You had to destroy me out of jealousy and spite? I pulled out my phone and showed him one of the journal photographs. Quote, Sarah was always too trusting. Even now, she probably believes this was about business. She never understood that I resented her from the beginning. She was smarter than me, more innovative, more respected. The company should have been mine alone. Destroying her wasn't just necessary, it was satisfying. He stared at the screen, his face crumpling. Sarah, please, we can work this out. I'll make it right. I'll clear your name. Give you back your share of the company, everything. You'll give me back my share? I laughed, but it was a bitter sound. Marcus, you don't seem to understand. I'm not here to negotiate. I'm here to watch you fall. As if on cue, there was a commotion outside. Through the window, I could see black SUVs pulling up the circular driveway. Federal agents were getting out, adjusting their bulletproof vests. That would be the FBI, I said conversationally. They work weekends when the case is big enough. Corporate fraud, securities violations, conspiracy, money laundering. You've been busy. Marcus looked out the window, his face collapsing into despair. My life is over. Yes, I agreed. It is. Just like you ended mine. There was a knock at the door. Federal agents. Open up. I walked to the door, then paused and looked back at Marcus. You know what the worst part is? I would have shared everything with you. The success, the recognition, the money. I would have been happy to build something amazing together. But you couldn't stand the thought of sharing credit with someone you considered inferior. The knocking became more insistent. Open the door now. One more thing, I said, reaching into my purse. I believe this belongs to you. I pulled out a small recording device and placed it on the dresser. I've been recording our conversations for months. Including this one. I wanted to make sure I had your confession on tape. Marcus stared at the device in horror. You recorded me admitting to framing you? I recorded you admitting to everything. The fraud, the theft, the conspiracy. But most importantly, I recorded you admitting that you destroyed me out of jealousy and malice. That's going to be very useful in the civil suits. The door burst open, and federal agents flooded the room. Marcus Webb, you're under arrest for securities fraud, wire fraud, and conspiracy. As they handcuffed him, Marcus looked at me with something approaching admiration. You did this, all of it, the investigation, the evidence, the timing. You orchestrated everything. I learned from the best, I replied. You taught me that sometimes good people have to become something else to survive. They led him away, still in his half-dressed tuxedo, past the wedding guests who were beginning to realize that something was very wrong. I watched from the window as they put him in the back of a federal vehicle, his hands cuffed behind his back. Richard Sterling appeared at my elbow. Ms. Chen, I presume? I turned to face Victoria's father, wondering if I was about to be arrested as well. Yes, sir. I want to thank you. And I want to apologize. I invested $50 million in a company built on stolen technology and fraud. I put my family's reputation at risk by associating with a criminal. I'm sorry about Victoria. This must be devastating for her. Sterling's expression softened slightly. Victoria is stronger than she appears. She'll recover from this embarrassment. But I don't think she'll ever fully trust her judgment in men again. He paused, studying my face. What you did was remarkable. The patience, the planning, the execution, it was brilliant. Also probably illegal in several ways. I'm prepared to face the consequences. I don't think that will be necessary. You've done law enforcement a favor by exposing this fraud. And you've saved my family from a much worse scandal down the road. He handed me a business card. When this is all over, I'd like to discuss some investment opportunities. The world needs people with your skills and integrity. I took the card, hardly believing what I was hearing. Thank you, sir. As Sterling walked away, I looked out at the chaos below. The wedding guests were being interviewed by FBI agents. The media was arriving, and the perfect society event was transforming into a crime scene. My phone buzzed with a text from my sister. The news is saying Marcus Webb was arrested at his wedding. Are you okay? I typed back. I'm perfect. I'll be home soon. But first, I had one more task to complete. The media circus surrounding Marcus's arrest was everything I had hoped for and more. The story had everything: corporate fraud, betrayal, a wedding day arrest, and a mysterious whistleblower who had brought down one of tech's rising stars. The headlines were brutal. Tech CEO arrested at wedding for corporate fraud. The algorithm of greed. How Marcus Webb stole his way to the top. Wedding bells and jail cells. A tale of Silicon Valley corruption. Within 48 hours, the story had gone viral. Social media was flooded with memes about Marcus's arrest, photos of him in handcuffs still wearing his tuxedo, and speculation about the identity of the whistleblower who had exposed him. I watched it all from my sister's apartment, still processing the surreal nature of what had happened. For months, I had been living a double life, carefully planning Marcus's downfall while pretending to be his loyal assistant. Now that it was over, I felt strangely empty. My phone rang constantly. Reporters, lawyers, former colleagues, and headhunters who suddenly wanted to talk to me again. The tech world was buzzing with the revelation that Sarah Chen had been framed, that the algorithms powering both Nexus Dynamics and Titan Corp were actually my creations. The legal proceedings moved quickly. Marcus's journal, combined with the financial records I had uncovered, provided overwhelming evidence of his crimes. He was charged with 19 counts of fraud, conspiracy, and money laundering. His lawyers tried to negotiate a plea deal, but the prosecutors were determined to make an example of him. Titan Corp's stock price plummeted when it was revealed that their market-beating AI platform was based on stolen technology. The company faced multiple lawsuits and regulatory investigations. Their executives claimed they had been deceived by Marcus, but their credibility was severely damaged. Meanwhile, Nexus Dynamics was in chaos. With their CEO in jail and their technology exposed as stolen, the company was facing bankruptcy. The board of directors was desperately trying to find a way to salvage the situation, but investors were fleeing and employees were updating their resumes. That's when Richard Sterling made his move. He called me 2 weeks after Marcus's arrest, requesting a meeting at his Manhattan office. I expected to discuss his earlier mention of investment opportunities, but he had something much bigger in mind. Sarah, he said, gesturing for me to sit in the chair across from his massive desk, I've been thinking about Nexus Dynamics. The company is essentially worthless now. Their valuation has dropped by 95%, and they're facing dozens of lawsuits. But the underlying technology is still valuable. I nodded, unsure where he was going with this. The technology is yours, he continued. You created it, you own the patents, and you have the expertise to develop it further. I'm proposing that we acquire Nexus Dynamics assets, clear the legal complications, and launch a new company with you as CEO. I stared at him, hardly believing what I was hearing. You want me to run the company? I want you to run your company. Marcus stole your work and built his empire on your innovations. Now that he's gone, there's no reason why you shouldn't benefit from your own genius. The offer was incredible. Sterling would provide $100 million in funding, handle all the legal complications, and give me 60% ownership of the new company. I would have complete control over the technology I had created, the resources to develop it further, and the opportunity to build something legitimate. But there was one condition. I need to know that you're done with revenge, Sterling said, his expression serious. What you did to Marcus was necessary, but it was also dangerous. If you're going to be the face of this new company, you need to be focused on the future, not the past. I thought about his words carefully. The truth was that revenge had consumed me for months. It had driven me to become someone I didn't recognize, to lie and manipulate and scheme. But it had also given me something I had lost, my power. Mr. Sterling, I said finally, I appreciate your concern. But I'm not the same person I was before Marcus destroyed my life. I've learned that sometimes good people have to become something else to survive in this world. I'm not interested in revenge anymore, I'm interested in justice. He studied my face for a long moment. And what does justice look like to you? It looks like building something better than what Marcus stole. It looks like creating a company that values integrity over profit, innovation over manipulation. It looks like proving that the person he tried to destroy was always stronger than he was. Sterling smiled. Then we have a deal. 6 months later, I stood in the lobby of Phoenix Technologies, the company I had built from the ashes of Marcus's empire. The name was symbolic. Like the mythical bird, I had risen from the destruction of my former life, transformed and more powerful than before. The office was everything Nexus Dynamics had pretended to be: innovative, ethical, and genuinely focused on changing the world. We had hired many of the employees who had been laid off when Nexus collapsed, offering them the chance to work for a company that actually lived up to its values. My AI platform had evolved far beyond what Marcus had stolen. With proper funding and a team of brilliant engineers, we had developed new applications that were revolutionizing not just financial forecasting, but healthcare, climate modeling, and social services. We were making a real difference in the world, not just generating profits for shareholders. The media had embraced the story of my comeback. I had become something of a folk hero in the tech world, the betrayed founder who had exposed corruption and built something better. Speaking invitations poured in from conferences, universities, and corporate boards. My story was being adapted for both a book and a Netflix series. But the most satisfying moment came when I received a letter from Marcus in prison. He was serving a 25-year sentence for his crimes, his appeals exhausted, his reputation destroyed. The letter was handwritten on prison stationery, and his once confident handwriting looked shaky and uncertain. Sarah, I've had a lot of time to think about what I did to you, and I know that apologies are meaningless at this point. But I want you to know that I understand now what I threw away. I was jealous of you from the beginning. You were smarter, more creative, more respected. People liked you in a way they never liked me. I told myself that I was the business brain while you were just the technical expert, but I knew the truth. You were the real genius behind everything we built. When the company started to succeed, I couldn't stand the thought of sharing credit. I wanted to be the sole founder, the visionary, the one who got all the recognition. So I convinced myself that you were a threat that needed to be eliminated. I know now that I destroyed the best thing in my life. Not just the company, but our friendship. You trusted me completely, and I betrayed that trust in the cruelest way possible. I've been following the news about Phoenix Technologies. What you've built is incredible. Everything we dreamed of creating together, but better. You've proven that you didn't need me at all. You never did. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it, but I wanted you to know that your revenge was perfect. You didn't just destroy my life. You showed the world who I really was. And more importantly, you showed them who you really are. I hope you're happy. I hope you've found peace. And I hope you never have to think about me again. Marcus. I read the letter twice, then filed it away in my desk drawer. Marcus was right. I didn't need to think about him anymore. He was part of my past, a chapter that had ended when he was led away in handcuffs. But his letter did make me reflect on the journey that had brought me here. The Sarah Chen who had been betrayed and destroyed was gone. In her place was someone harder, more strategic, more aware of the darker aspects of human nature. I wasn't sure if that was a good thing or a bad thing, but it was the truth. 2 years after Marcus's arrest, Phoenix Technologies was valued at $2 billion. We had gone public 6 months earlier, and I was now worth more than Marcus had ever been. But money wasn't the point anymore. It was about proving that integrity and innovation could triumph over corruption and theft. The tech world had changed too. The scandal surrounding Marcus had sparked a broader conversation about corporate ethics, intellectual property theft, and the toxic culture that sometimes pervaded Silicon Valley. New regulations had been passed, whistleblower protections had been strengthened, and companies were being more careful about due diligence. I had become a reluctant spokesperson for these changes, speaking at conferences and congressional hearings about the importance of ethical business practices. It was ironic. The person who had orchestrated one of the most elaborate revenge schemes in corporate history was now being held up as a model of integrity. But I was careful never to lie about what I had done. When asked about how I had uncovered Marcus's crimes, I was honest about the deception involved. I had lied, stolen, and manipulated to get the evidence I needed. I had become everything I had once despised about corporate culture. Sometimes, I told one interviewer, good people have to make compromises to survive in a corrupt system. The question is whether you can find your way back to who you want to be afterward. It was a question I was still answering. The most unexpected development was my relationship with Victoria Sterling. After her humiliation at the wedding, she had disappeared from public life for several months. When she finally emerged, she had transformed herself from a socialite into a serious businesswoman, launching a nonprofit focused on helping victims of corporate fraud. We met at a charity event, and I was surprised by how different she seemed. The entitled, demanding woman I had observed in Marcus's office was gone, replaced by someone who was focused and determined. I wanted to thank you, she said during our conversation. What you did saved me from making the biggest mistake of my life. I'm sorry you had to go through that humiliation. She shrugged. I learned something important about myself. I was attracted to Marcus because he represented success and power. I didn't look deeper to see who he really was. That's on me. We began working together on various initiatives, and I found myself genuinely liking her. She was intelligent, compassionate, and had channeled her experience into something positive. There was even a spark of romantic interest, though we were both cautious about moving too quickly. But the past had a way of intruding on the present. The call came on a Tuesday morning while I was reviewing quarterly reports. My assistant, Rebecca, who was actually my assistant, not a cover identity, knocked on my door with an urgent expression. Sarah, there's someone here to see you. She says it's about Marcus Webb. I looked up from my computer, immediately alert. Who is it? She says her name is Jennifer Morrison. She used to work at Nexus Dynamics. I remembered Jennifer. She had been Marcus's assistant before I had arrived as Isabella. She had looked frazzled and overworked, and I had assumed she had simply burned out from Marcus's demanding management style. Send her in. Jennifer entered my office looking nervous and uncertain. She was a small woman in her 30s, with short brown hair and tired eyes. She clutched a manila envelope in her hands like a lifeline. Ms. Chen, she began, I'm sorry to bother you, but I have something I think you need to see. She handed me the envelope, and I opened it to find a thick stack of documents. As I scanned through them, my blood ran cold. They were employment records, background checks, and hiring documents, all related to Isabella Rodriguez. Someone had been investigating my fake identity, tracing the connections between Isabella and Sarah Chen. The investigation was thorough and professional, the kind of work that would have cost tens of thousands of dollars. Where did you get these? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Marcus gave them to me before he was arrested, Jennifer said. He told me to keep them safe, that they might be valuable someday. I didn't understand what they were at the time, but after reading about everything that happened, I started to piece it together. I looked up at her, realizing the implications. You know who Isabella Rodriguez really was. I know that Isabella Rodriguez was Sarah Chen, she said quietly. I know that you worked as Marcus's assistant for months under a false identity. I know that you had access to his private files, his communications, his personal information. The room was silent except for the hum of the air conditioning. I was trying to process what this meant, how Marcus had figured out my deception, and why he had kept the information secret. "Why are you bringing this to me now?" I asked. Jennifer's expression hardened. "Because Marcus destroyed my life too." She sat down in the chair across from my desk, her hands shaking slightly. "I worked for Marcus for 3 years. I saw how he treated people, how he manipulated situations to his advantage. When you were terminated, I knew something was wrong. The evidence was too convenient, too perfect. Why didn't you say anything?" "Because I was scared." Marcus made it clear that questioning his decisions was career suicide. "But I started keeping records, documenting his behavior, collecting evidence of his lies and manipulations." She pulled out another folder, this one much thicker. "I have proof that Marcus fabricated evidence against 3 other employees over the years. I have recordings of him bragging about his schemes. I have financial records showing how he stole from the company." I stared at the documents, hardly believing what I was seeing. "You've been investigating him for years?" "I've been documenting his crimes for years. I just never had the courage to do anything about it." She looked up at me with something approaching admiration. "Until I saw what you did. The way you took him down, the precision of your planning, the perfect timing, it was brilliant." "Jennifer, what I did was illegal. I committed fraud, theft, and probably a dozen other crimes. And you exposed a criminal who had destroyed dozens of lives." She leaned forward, her voice intense. "But now there's a problem. Marcus knew who you were before he was arrested. He documented your deception, but he never used the information." "Why?" It was a good question, and one that had troubling implications. If Marcus had known I was Sarah Chen, why had he allowed me to continue working for him? Why had he given me access to his private files? Why had he essentially handed me the evidence I needed to destroy him? "I think," Jennifer continued, "that Marcus wanted to be caught. I think he was tired of lying, tired of looking over his shoulder, tired of being someone he wasn't. You gave him a way out." The idea was disturbing because it suggested that my revenge hadn't been as complete as I had thought. If Marcus had willingly participated in his own downfall, then I hadn't really defeated him. I had just given him what he wanted. "There's something else," Jennifer said. "Marcus left instructions for these documents to be released if anything happened to him in prison. He's been moved to protective custody twice because of threats from other inmates. If he's killed, all of this becomes public." I understood the threat. If Marcus died in prison, the evidence of my deception would be released, destroying my reputation and possibly leading to criminal charges. I would lose everything I had built, Phoenix Technologies, my restored reputation, my new life. "What do you want?" I asked. Jennifer smiled, but it wasn't a pleasant expression. "I want what you got. I want justice. I want recognition. I want the people who destroyed my life to pay for what they did. Marcus is already in prison. Marcus was just one person in a system that protects people like him. I want to expose the whole system. I want to bring down everyone who enabled him, everyone who looked the other way, everyone who profited from his crimes." She leaned back in her chair, studying my face. "And I want you to help me do it." I stared at Jennifer across my desk, processing the magnitude of what she was proposing. She wanted me to help her expose a network of corruption that extended far beyond Marcus's individual crimes. She wanted to take down investors, board members, executives, and regulators who had enabled or ignored his fraud. It was exactly the kind of crusade that the old Sarah Chen would have embraced. But I wasn't the old Sarah Chen anymore. I was someone who had built a successful company, who had moved on from the past, who had supposedly found peace. "Jennifer," I said carefully, "I understand your anger. I understand the desire for justice. But what you're proposing could destroy everything I've built." "What you've built is based on a lie," she replied. "You committed crimes to get your revenge. If that comes out, Phoenix Technologies will be destroyed anyway. Your reputation will be ruined, your investors will flee, and you'll be back where you started." She was right, and we both knew it. The evidence she possessed was a sword hanging over my head, ready to fall at any moment. Marcus had constructed the perfect trap. Even from prison, he had found a way to control my fate. What exactly are you asking me to do? Jennifer opened her laptop and showed me a detailed presentation. She had spent months researching the network of corruption surrounding Marcus's crimes. Board members who had ignored obvious red flags. Investors who had profited from fraudulent information. Regulators who had been bribed or intimidated into silence. I want to expose all of them, she said. I want to show the world how deep this corruption goes. And I want to do it in a way that's so comprehensive, so devastating, that the entire system has to change. The plan was ambitious and dangerous. It would require infiltrating multiple organizations, gathering evidence from dozens of sources, and orchestrating a coordinated release of information that would implicate hundreds of people. It would be the largest corporate corruption scandal in history. And if I refuse, then I'll do it myself. And when I do, I'll make sure that Sarah Chen's role in Marcus's downfall is part of the story. The brilliant tech executive who committed fraud to get her revenge will be much more interesting than the assistant who collected evidence. I looked at her with new respect. Jennifer Morrison was much more dangerous than I had realized. She wasn't just a whistleblower, she was a strategist, someone who had learned from watching Marcus's manipulations and had decided to use those same tactics for her own purposes. You're blackmailing me. I'm offering you a partnership. We can work together to expose the truth, or we can work separately and destroy each other. Your choice. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city below. Phoenix Technologies occupied 3 floors of a Manhattan skyscraper, employing over 500 people who depended on the company for their livelihoods. I had built something real, something valuable, something that was making a positive difference in the world. But Jennifer was right. It was all built on a foundation of lies. If the truth about Isabella Rodriguez came out, everything would collapse. My employees would lose their jobs, my investors would lose their money, and I would lose everything I had worked to rebuild. Unless I took control of the narrative. If we do this, I said, turning back to face her, we do it my way. No reckless moves, no unnecessary risks. We expose the corruption, but we do it strategically, in a way that maximizes the impact while minimizing the collateral damage. Jennifer smiled. I was hoping you'd say that. And we agree on one thing up front. When this is over, when the truth comes out, we both face the consequences. No more hiding, no more deception. If we're going to expose corruption, we need to be honest about our own crimes. Agreed. I sat back down and looked at her presentation more carefully. The scope was staggering. Dozens of companies, hundreds of individuals, billions of dollars in fraud and corruption. It would take months to gather all the evidence, years to see it through the legal system. But it was also an opportunity to do something genuinely meaningful. Marcus's crimes had been personal, but the system that had enabled him was much larger. If we could expose that system, we could prevent thousands of future victims from suffering the same fate. All right, I said, let's bring down the whole damn system. Over the next 6 months, Jennifer and I worked together to map the network of corruption that had enabled Marcus's crimes. What we discovered was more extensive and sophisticated than either of us had imagined. The corruption wasn't random or opportunistic, it was systematic and organized. There were investment firms that specialized in laundering money through tech startups. Regulatory officials who had been systematically bribed or compromised. Board members who served on multiple companies, sharing information and coordinating manipulation schemes. Marcus hadn't been a criminal mastermind operating alone. He had been part of a network, a carefully constructed system that allowed certain people to steal, defraud, and manipulate with impunity. The network protected its members, silenced whistleblowers, and eliminated threats. I was beginning to understand why Marcus had been so confident in his scheme against me. He hadn't just been relying on his own resources. He had been backed by a network of powerful people who had a vested interest in protecting him. The investigation required us to become different people yet again. I couldn't use my real identity or the Isabella Rodriguez persona. Both were too compromised. Instead, we created new identities, new backgrounds, new lives that would allow us to infiltrate the organizations we needed to investigate. Jennifer proved to be remarkably skilled at this kind of work. She had spent years observing Marcus's manipulations, learning his techniques, understanding how corruption operated at the highest levels. She was also motivated by a deep sense of justice that reminded me of my younger self. We worked methodically, gathering evidence from multiple sources: financial records, email communications, recorded conversations, witness testimony. We built cases against dozens of individuals and organizations. The evidence was overwhelming, but it was also dangerous. Several other investigators who had gotten too close to the network had suffered mysterious accidents or sudden career destructions. The breakthrough came when we discovered that the network had been systematically targeting and destroying whistleblowers for years. They had developed sophisticated techniques for discrediting anyone who threatened their operations. Character assassination, evidence fabrication, legal harassment, the same tactics Marcus had used against me, but applied on a much larger scale. I realized that my case hadn't been unique. Marcus's betrayal had been personal, but the methods he had used were part of a standard playbook. There were dozens of other victims, brilliant people who had been destroyed to protect the network's interests. That's when I made a decision that would change everything. Instead of releasing our evidence all at once, we decided to tell the story differently. We would focus on the victims first, showing the human cost of the corruption before revealing the systematic nature of the crimes. I reached out to other people who had been destroyed by the network. Scientists who had been discredited for challenging fraudulent research. Journalists who had been silenced for investigating corruption. Entrepreneurs who had been crushed for refusing to participate in illegal schemes. What emerged was a pattern of sophisticated character assassination that had been operating for over a decade. The network had perfected the art of destroying people's reputations, using fabricated evidence, coordinated media campaigns, and legal harassment to eliminate threats. But they had made one crucial mistake: they had kept records of their operations. The same paranoia that had led Marcus to document his crimes had infected the entire network. They had detailed files on every victim, every operation, every success. Jennifer and I spent months collecting these records, building a comprehensive database of the network's activities. We had evidence of over 200 separate operations, involving hundreds of perpetrators and thousands of victims. The question was how to release this information in a way that would have maximum impact. Simply dumping the evidence would be overwhelming and easy to dismiss. We needed to tell the story in a way that would capture public attention and force action. That's when I had the idea for the documentary. Working with a team of investigative journalists and filmmakers, we began producing a comprehensive documentary series that would tell the story of the network's operations. We would focus on individual victims, showing how their lives had been destroyed, then reveal the systematic nature of the corruption. The series would be called The Algorithm of Destruction, and it would show how the network had used sophisticated techniques to eliminate threats and protect their interests. Most importantly, it would reveal the identities of the perpetrators and the extent of their crimes. But producing the documentary required us to make a difficult decision. We would have to reveal our own roles in the investigation, including my deception as Isabella Rodriguez and our methods of gathering evidence. We would be confessing to crimes while exposing much larger crimes. "Are you ready for that?" Jennifer asked during one of our planning sessions. I thought about the question carefully. Revealing the truth about Isabella Rodriguez would destroy my reputation and probably lead to criminal charges. Phoenix Technologies would be damaged, possibly destroyed. I would lose everything I had built. But I would also be part of something much larger, a story that could change how corporate corruption was investigated and prosecuted. The documentary would show that sometimes good people had to break the law to expose much larger crimes. "I'm ready," I said. "But I want to do one thing first." I visited Marcus in prison on a cold Tuesday morning in February. He had been incarcerated for 3 years, and the experience had changed him dramatically. The confident, manipulative executive was gone, replaced by someone who looked older, tired, and strangely peaceful. We sat across from each other in the visitors' room, separated by a thick glass partition. Marcus picked up the phone first, his movements careful and deliberate. "Sarah," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I wondered when you would come." "Hello, Marcus. You look good. Successful. I've been following the news about Phoenix Technologies. You've built something incredible." "I built something honest." He smiled sadly. "Yes, I suppose you did. That was always the difference between us, wasn't it? You built things to last, while I built things to profit." We sat in silence for a moment, looking at each other across the glass. Finally, Marcus spoke again. "I know why you're here. You've found the network. You've discovered that what I did to you was just part of something much larger." I wasn't surprised that he knew. Marcus had always been perceptive, and he had had 3 years to think about the implications of his actions. "Jennifer Morrison came to see me," he continued. "She told me about your investigation. She wanted to know if I was willing to cooperate. And I told her yes. I told her everything I knew about the network, about how it operated, about who was involved. I gave her names, dates, financial records, everything." I stared at him, trying to understand his motivations. "Why?" "Because I'm tired of being afraid. I'm tired of looking over my shoulder, wondering when they're going to decide I'm a liability. I'm tired of being part of something that destroys people." He leaned forward, his eyes intense. "Do you know what the worst part of prison is? It's not the violence or the isolation. It's the clarity. You have nothing to do but think about what you've done, about the choices you've made, about the person you've become. And what have you concluded? That I was never the mastermind I thought I was. I was just a tool, a useful idiot who was willing to destroy his best friend for money and recognition. The real criminals are still out there, still operating, still destroying lives." Marcus reached into his pocket and pulled out a small notebook, the same kind of leather-bound journal he had always carried. "I've been writing again. Not plans this time, but confessions. Every crime I committed, every person I hurt, every lie I told. I want it all to be part of the record." He slid the notebook through the small opening in the glass partition. "This is for you. Use it however you think best." I picked up the notebook, feeling the weight of it in my hands. "What happens to you when this all comes out?" "I don't know. Maybe they'll try to kill me. Maybe they'll find ways to make my sentence worse. Maybe they'll just let me serve my time and disappear." He shrugged. "It doesn't matter anymore. I'm already dead in every way that counts." "Marcus." "No, Sarah. Don't try to comfort me. I don't deserve it. What I did to you was unforgivable. The only thing I can do now is try to make sure it doesn't happen to anyone else." I looked at him through the glass, seeing something I had never seen before: genuine remorse. The man who had destroyed my life was gone, replaced by someone who was trying to find a way to make amends. "I forgive you," I said quietly. Marcus's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you. That means more than you know." As I left the prison, I realized that my revenge was finally complete. Not because I had destroyed Marcus, that had been accomplished years ago. But because I had found a way to transform the pain and anger into something constructive. The network that had enabled his crimes would be exposed, and future victims would be protected. The documentary premiered 6 months later. The Algorithm of Destruction was released simultaneously on Netflix, Amazon Prime, and HBO Max, ensuring maximum reach and impact. The 6-part series detailed the network's operations, revealed the identities of the perpetrators, and showed the human cost of their crimes. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Within 48 hours, the documentary had become the most-watched series in streaming history. Social media exploded with discussions about corporate corruption, whistleblower protection, and the need for systemic reform. Federal investigators launched coordinated raids on dozens of companies and organizations. Over 150 people were arrested in the largest corporate corruption bust in U.S. history. The network that had operated with impunity for over a decade was finally exposed and destroyed. The personal cost was significant. I was charged with fraud and conspiracy for my role as Isabella Rodriguez, though I received a suspended sentence and community service in exchange for my cooperation with the investigation. Phoenix Technologies suffered a temporary crisis of confidence, but ultimately emerged stronger as investors and employees rallied around the company's commitment to transparency. Jennifer Morrison became a federal whistleblower, receiving protection and financial compensation for her role in exposing the network. She used the money to start a foundation that helped other victims of corporate corruption. Marcus was transferred to a minimum security facility and became a star witness in dozens of prosecutions. His cooperation led to the conviction of over 50 high-level executives and the recovery of billions of dollars in stolen assets. Victoria Sterling and I were married 2 years later, in a small ceremony attended by our families and closest friends. We had both learned the importance of looking beyond surface appearances, of building relationships based on genuine trust and respect. The documentary won every major award, including an Emmy for Outstanding Documentary Series and an Oscar for Best Documentary Feature. But more importantly, it led to substantial reforms in corporate governance, securities regulation, and whistleblower protection. I kept Marcus's final journal, but I never read it. Some confessions are too private to share, even with the person who was wronged. It was enough to know that he had found a way to make amends, to transform his guilt into something useful. 5 years after the documentary's release, I testified before Congress about the need for stronger protections for corporate whistleblowers. As I sat in the witness chair, looking out at the senators and representatives who would decide the fate of future legislation, I reflected on the journey that had brought me there. I had started as Sarah Chen, a naive tech executive who believed that hard work and integrity would always be rewarded. I had become Isabella Rodriguez, a master manipulator who was willing to lie and deceive to get justice. And finally, I had evolved into someone who understood that sometimes the greatest good requires the greatest risks. The algorithm of revenge had been replaced by an algorithm of justice. It was more complex, more nuanced, and ultimately more satisfying than simple vengeance. Because true justice isn't about destroying your enemies, it's about building a world where their crimes become impossible. As I finished my testimony and walked out of the Capitol building, I felt a sense of peace that had eluded me for years. The girl who had been betrayed and destroyed was gone. In her place was a woman who had learned to transform pain into purpose, anger into action, and revenge into something much more powerful, hope. The algorithm of vengeance had run its course. The algorithm of justice would run forever.